The planet was called Viridian, but the city was Nova Sol. It was a place of towering buildings that scratched the sky. Bright neon lights in blue, red, and green painted the streets below. The air always had a smell. It was a mix of sizzling food from street stalls, the sharp smell of fuel from speeders, and the clean, wet smell of rain. Jin walked home. His body felt heavy and tired. He worked as a cargo loader at the spaceport. His job was moving heavy crates all day. His muscles ached with a deep, familiar pain. All he wanted was to get to his small apartment. He imagined a hot shower and a warm meal. The cold rain fell in a steady drizzle. It made the dark streets shine under the city lights. He pulled the collar of his jacket up, trying to keep the water from running down his neck. To save time, he turned into a narrow alley. It was a shortcut he used often. This alley was not like the main streets. It was dirty and dark. Large overflowing waste containers lined the walls. The smell here was not good. It was a mix of rotting food and damp metal. The only light came from a flickering sign above a locked door. Jin kept his head down, his boots splashing in small puddles on the permacrete ground. He was almost at the other end when he heard it. It was a small sound, a soft whimpering noise. It was almost lost under the sound of the rain and the distant hum of the city. Jin stopped. He listened. He thought it might be an animal, a lost cat or a scuttler looking for food. He took another step, but the sound came again. It was a little sob full of fear. He turned towards the sound. It came from behind a large, rusty waste container. Cautiously, Jin moved closer. He peered around the container. It was not an animal. Huddled against the cold, wet wall was a child. But she was not a human child. She was small and thin. Her skin was a pale silvery color. It seemed to catch the little light there was and hold it, making her glow faintly. She had large, almond-shaped eyes. They were a deep, shining purple like precious gems. Her hair was not hair, but fine, silken threads of silver that fell around her shoulders. Her clothes were made of a fine, shimmering fabric, but they were torn and dirty. One of her long, pointed ears had a small, nasty cut on its tip. She was shivering. Her whole small body shook from the cold and from fear. Her huge amethyst eyes were wide with terror, fixed on him. She looked like a lost precious jewel left in the mud. Jin's tiredness vanished. His aching muscles were forgotten. A powerful feeling rose in his chest. It was the simple human need to help a child in trouble. He did not stop to think about what she was or where she came from. He only saw a little girl, scared and cold and alone. "Hey," he said softly. His voice was low and gentle. He did not want to scare her more. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The girl flinched, pressing herself harder against the wall. She made another small, frightened sound. Jin knew he had to be careful. He was a big man, tall and broad from his work. To this small, terrified creature, he must have looked like a giant. He slowly moved closer, keeping his movements smooth and easy to see. He knelt down in the wet alley, ignoring the cold water that immediately soaked through the knee of his pants. This made him smaller, less threatening. "You're safe now," he murmured, the same way he would talk to a scared animal. "You're freezing." He looked at her, shivering in her thin, torn clothes. The solution was simple. Without a second thought, he started to unzip his thick, insulated work coat. It was a sturdy, practical thing, lined with synthetic fur to keep out the chill of the spaceport hangars. It was his favorite coat, warm and comfortable. He shrugged it off his shoulders. The cold, damp air of the alley immediately bit through his shirt, making him shiver, but he didn't care. He held the large, heavy coat in his hands. The alien girl watched him, her luminous eyes following his every move. She was still trembling, her breath coming in little puffs of mist in the cold air. "This will help," Jin said softly. He leaned forward slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. She didn't. She just watched him, frozen in fear and cold. He gently draped the massive coat over her small shoulders. It was far too big for her. It swallowed her whole. The hem pooled on the wet ground around her. The sleeves hung down far past her hands. For a moment, only her small, silver-haired head and her huge, fearful eyes were visible from within the bulky fabric. Then, something changed. The deep, insulating warmth of the coat began to seep into her cold skin. The shivering that racked her small frame began to slow. It did not stop all at once, but the violent shaking became little tremors and then just the occasional shiver. The coat blocked the wind and the rain. For the first time in what was probably hours, she was not cold. She looked up at him from within the collar of the coat. The raw terror in her amazing eyes was slowly being replaced by something else. It was a flicker of wonder, a look of deep, profound confusion. Who was this large, strange being? Why was he helping her? He was not like the others who had chased her. He was giving her warmth. Jin saw the change in her eyes. He felt a small smile touch his lips. "There," he said, his voice still a soft rumble. "That's better, isn't it?" He looked at her, wrapped up in his coat, and he knew he could not leave her here. This dark, wet alley was no place for a child. He had no idea what to do with her. He didn't know who she was or who was looking for her. But that was a problem for later. Right now she needed to be somewhere safe and warm. He straightened up, his knees complaining. He looked down at the small, bundled-up figure. "All right, little one," he said with a sigh. It was a sigh of resignation, but also of determination. His quiet evening was gone. His simple life was now complicated. But he knew without any doubt that it was the right thing to do. The apartment felt different with Sumin in it. The usual quiet was gone, replaced by a soft, watchful silence. Jin closed the door, shutting out the cold and the noise of the city. He turned to look at the small alien girl standing in his entryway. She was still wrapped in his massive coat, her wide amethyst eyes taking in everything. She looked like a lost princess in a rough woolen robe. "You can sit down," Jin said, pointing to the worn but comfortable couch against the wall. Sumin didn't move. She just stared at the couch, then back at him. He realized she didn't understand his words. He walked over slowly and sat on the couch himself, patting the space beside him. He tried to look as harmless as possible. Hesitantly, she shuffled forward. The coat was so long it trailed on the floor behind her. She climbed onto the couch, the fabric puffing up around her. She sat perfectly straight, her small hands hidden inside the long sleeves. Jin's mind was racing. What was he supposed to do now? He had an alien child in his apartment. He should probably call someone. The city authorities, the spaceport security, someone. But a deep protective feeling stopped him. She had been so scared in that alley. Whoever she was running from, she was terrified of them. Handing her over to strangers in uniforms felt wrong. First things first, he thought. She needed food and a clean place. He stood up and went to the kitchen. Sumin's eyes followed his every move. He opened a cabinet and took out a simple bowl. He filled an electric kettle with water and turned it on. From a drawer, he pulled out a packet of instant noodles. It was cheap, fast food, but it was hot and filling. Sumin watched, fascinated as he poured the hot water into the bowl over the dry noodles. The steam rose in a warm cloud. Jin carried the bowl carefully to the low table in front of the couch. He placed it down and handed her a pair of chopsticks. She looked at the chopsticks, then at the bowl of steaming noodles. She didn't move. Jin picked up his own pair of chopsticks from the table. He pretended to eat from an imaginary bowl, making a show of it. "See? Food. It's good." He pointed to the bowl, then to her. Sumin looked from his face to the food. Slowly, she reached a small silver hand out from the coat sleeve. Her fingers were long and delicate. She picked up the chopsticks with an unexpected grace. She mimicked his actions, dipping the sticks into the bowl and lifting a few noodles to her mouth. She blew on them gently, then took a small bite. Her reaction was immediate. Her large jewel-like eyes widened even more, not with fear but with surprise and delight. The noodles were a simple flavor, but to her they must have been something new and wonderful. She took another, larger bite. A soft, chiming sound escaped her lips. It was almost like laughter. Jin felt a smile spread across his own face. He hadn't realized how worried he had been until he saw her eat. He sat back in a chair across from her and watched as she carefully, happily, ate every last noodle and even drank some of the broth from the bowl. When she was done, she placed the chopsticks neatly on the empty bowl and looked at him. The fear in her eyes was almost gone, replaced by a quiet curiosity. She pointed at the bowl, then at her own stomach, and gave a small, satisfied nod. Jin laughed. "Good, I'm glad you liked it." He noticed the cut on the tip of her long, pointed ear. It looked clean, but he wanted to make sure. He went to his small bathroom and got a clean cloth and a little antiseptic spray. He came back and showed them to her. "This might help," he said, pointing to his own ear. Sumin watched him cautiously as he knelt in front of her. He was very careful, his movements slow and gentle. He sprayed a little of the antiseptic on the cloth and dabbed it softly on the cut. She flinched for a second at the cool touch, but she didn't pull away. She trusted him. When he was done, he put the supplies away. He sat back down and they just looked at each other for a moment. The only sound was the hum of the city outside the window. Jin pointed to his chest.
Jin, she pointed to herself.
Sumin, he nodded and smiled. Then he had an idea. He pointed to the coat she was still wearing. Coat, he said. She looked down at the bulky fabric, then back at him, her head tilted in question. He was about to try another word when Sumin did something extraordinary. She reached her small hand out from the sleeve and gently touched the back of his hand where it rested on his knee. The moment her skin touched his, a wave of feeling washed over him. It wasn't a thought or a picture he saw with his eyes. It was a feeling he felt in his mind. It was a powerful, warm feeling of gratitude. It was the feeling of being safe and warm after being cold and terrified. And then an image formed in his head. It was not clear like a photo, but more like a dream. He saw a tall, majestic figure made of light and shadow. The figure had the same long ears and luminous eyes as Sumin, but they were older, powerful, and surrounded by a soft, glowing light, like a crown. The feeling attached to this image was one of deep love and also of deep loss. This was her parent. Then, as quickly as it came, it was gone. Jin jerked his hand back, his eyes wide with shock. He stared at Sumin. She looked back at him, her expression calm and serious, as if she had just explained everything she needed to. She was psionic. She could share thoughts and feelings directly. That soft chime wasn't just a sound. It was her laughter. And that image, that was her parent. His simple act of kindness suddenly felt much, much bigger. This wasn't just a lost child. She was someone important. The parent he saw in his mind was no ordinary person. They were a leader, a ruler, someone of great power. And she was sitting on his worn-out couch, wrapped in his old work coat after eating cheap noodles. He looked at her, and she looked back, her large purple eyes clear and trusting. She had told him who she was in the only way she could. The problem was, Jin had no idea what to do with that information. He knew now that her parent was looking for her, but he also knew, with a cold certainty, that the people who had chased her into that alley were probably not the good guys. He was in over his head. But as he looked at Sumin, who was now yawning, the fear leaving her small body, he knew he couldn't turn back. He had to keep her safe. The morning sun tried to push through the haze over Nova Sol. Inside Jin's apartment, Sumin was still asleep on the couch. Jin had given her a soft blanket and a pillow. She was curled up in a small ball, her silver hair spread out, looking peaceful. Jin had not slept much. He sat at his small table, thinking about the image she had put in his mind. The tall, glowing figure, her parent. Who were they? And who was trying to hurt their child? He knew he could not keep her hidden forever. She needed proper help. He decided to take her to a public help center. They had people who dealt with lost citizens and visitors. It seemed like the safest, most correct thing to do. When Sumin woke up, he gave her some fruit to eat. She seemed rested and less afraid. He pointed to the door and made walking motions with his fingers. "We need to go out," he said softly. Sumin watched him. She seemed to understand they were leaving. She went to the couch and picked up his heavy work coat. She held it out to him. Jin shook his head. "No, you wear it." He helped her put it on. The big coat still swallowed her whole, but it was good disguise. With the collar up and a hood he found for her, she looked like a small human child in an oversized coat. Only her unusual way of walking might give her away. They left the apartment and walked down to the street. The city was busy now, full of people and speeders. Sumin stayed very close to Jin's side, her small hand holding onto the edge of his shirt. She was nervous in the crowd. Her head was down, hidden by the hood. Jin led her towards the central district where the help center was located. He walked at a steady pace, not too fast. He tried to act normal, like a man taking his little sister or daughter for a walk, but he soon had a strange feeling. A feeling of being watched. He glanced over his shoulder. The crowd was thick. He saw nothing unusual. He kept walking. A few minutes later, he looked again. This time he saw it. A sleek black ground vehicle was moving slowly along the street, keeping pace with them. Its windows were dark, so he could not see who was inside. His heart started to beat faster. He tried to tell himself he was being paranoid. Maybe it was just a rich person's car. He decided to test it. He turned down a smaller, less crowded street. The black vehicle turned too. Fear shot through him. They were being followed. He tightened his grip on Sumin's hand and walked faster. He needed to get to the help center quickly. It was just a few more blocks, but as they turned another corner, the black vehicle suddenly sped up. It glided silently past them and stopped a short distance ahead, blocking part of the sidewalk. The doors opened. A woman stepped out. She was dressed in a sharp gray uniform with no markings. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was serious and calm. Two large men in similar uniforms stood behind her. They did not look friendly. The woman walked towards Jin and Sumin. Her eyes moved from Jin's face to the small hooded figure clinging to his side. "Jin, sir," the woman said. Her voice was level and professional. "My name is Hyun. We need to talk about your guest." Jin felt his body go tense. He moved slightly, putting himself between Hyun and Sumin. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough. "We are a security group," Hyun said. She did not give a specific name. "We are here to help." Her eyes were fixed on the coat-wrapped child. "We know who she is." Sumin pressed herself against Jin's leg, trembling. A soft, frightened sound came from under the hood. "You're scaring her," Jin said. "The situation is scary, Jin," Hyun replied. She kept her distance, but her presence was overwhelming. "Do you have any idea what you have done? Or rather, who you have found?" Jin said nothing. He just stared at her. Hyun took a slow breath. "The child you found is not just any lost girl. She is the daughter of the most powerful being in this part of the galaxy. Her parent is the Luminous One, the ruler of the Alaris people." Jin's mind flashed back to the image Sumin had shared, the tall glowing figure with a crown of light. It made a terrible sense. The Alaris, Hyun continued, are a psionic race. They keep to themselves. They think we humans are chaotic, violent. The Luminous One has strict rules against their people mixing with ours. She looked pointedly at Sumin, and they are extremely protective of their heir. Jin's mouth felt dry. "So we just need to contact them. Tell them she's safe." A grim smile touched Hyun's lips. "It's not that simple. The Luminous One believes their child has been taken, stolen by humans. They have sent a message to our government." She paused, letting her next words sink in. "The message says that if the heir is not returned, completely unharmed within one planetary cycle, they will sever all ties. And then they will use their fleet to glass this entire colony from orbit. They will burn every city, including Nova Sol, until the ground is melted and empty." The world seemed to tilt for Jin. The noise of the city faded away. He looked down at the top of Sumin's hood. This small, gentle girl who liked instant noodles. Her safety was now tied to the survival of millions of people. His simple act of kindness had not just complicated his life. It had put his entire world in the path of destruction. He felt a cold dread wash over him. He was a cargo loader. He was not a diplomat or a hero. He was just a man who had tried to help a cold, scared child. "You see the problem," Hyun said softly. "You meant well, but you have brought a storm to our doorstep. We need to take her now. We have a plan to return her in a formal, peaceful way. It is the only way to stop a war." She held out her hand, not to Jin, but towards Sumin. Sumin let out a small, terrified whimper and buried her face in Jin's leg, clutching him tightly. Jin looked from Hyun's outstretched hand to the scared child holding on to him. He thought of the warm, grateful feeling she had shared with him. He thought of her eating noodles on his couch. She trusted him. And these people in their cold uniforms wanted to take her away to be part of a political deal. He made a decision. Slowly, he shook his head. "No," he said, his voice firmer than he felt. "You're not taking her. Not like this. You're scaring her." Hyun's calm expression finally cracked, showing a flash of frustration. "Jin, this is not a game. The fate of our world is at stake." "I know," Jin said, putting a protective arm around Sumin. "But she's just a little girl. And she's scared. If you want to help, you do it with me. I'm not letting her out of my sight." He looked Hyun directly in the eyes. He was just one man against an official operation. But he would not back down. Not while Sumin was shaking against him. The alley had been full of fear, and he would not let her feel that fear again, not if he could help it. The room they were taken to was nothing like Jin's apartment. It was white, clean, and very cold. There was no comfortable couch, no pictures on the walls, no kitchen smelling of food. There was just a hard table, some chairs, and a single bed in the corner. The air hummed with a quiet energy, and the door had no handle on the inside. They were prisoners, even if Hyun called it protective custody. Soo-min stood frozen in the middle of the room. She had taken off the hood, and her large amethyst eyes darted around, taking in the sterile walls. The fear was back, stronger than before. She shuffled closer to Jin and gripped his hand tightly. Her small fingers were cold. "It's okay," Jin murmured, though he didn't feel okay at all. "We're safe here." Hyun came in, followed by one of her aides carrying a tray. On the tray were 2 small cups filled with a thick green paste. "This is a high-nutrient gel," Hyun explained. "It will provide all the sustenance she needs." The aide placed the tray on the table. Soo-min looked at the green paste and then up at Jin, her expression one of clear distrust. She shook her head and took a step back. "See?" Jin said to Hyun. "She doesn't want it. She's scared of this place. She's scared of you." "Her feelings are not the priority right now," Hyun said, her voice tight. "The priority is returning her to her parent in a state of perfect health to prevent a war. My team is preparing the formal handover ceremony. The Alaris diplomats will be here in a few hours." "A ceremony?" Jin asked, his anger rising. "You're going to hand her over like a package? Look at her." Soo-min was now hiding behind Jin's legs, peeking out at Hyun. "It is the way these things are done," Hyun insisted, her calm professionalism finally breaking. "It is about respect and protocol. It is the only language powerful beings understand." "Is it?" Jin shot back. He knelt down so he was at Soo-min's level. He looked into her frightened eyes and then back up at Hyun. "You don't get it. She wasn't just scared of the rain in that alley. She was scared of being alone. She was scared of being cold. I didn't give her a political solution. I didn't give her protocol. I gave her warmth. I gave her food she liked. I made her feel safe. Isn't that a kind of power too? A kind they might understand?" Hyun stared at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. She clearly thought his ideas were childish. Jin had an idea. It was a simple, foolish idea, but it was all he had. He stood up. "Do you have a way to heat water?" he asked. Hyun looked confused. "What? Why?" "Just get me a bowl of hot water," Jin said. "And see if anyone has a packet of instant noodles. The spicy kind." Hyun looked like she was about to refuse. She looked at Soo-min, who was still hiding, and then back at Jin's determined face. She let out a short, frustrated sigh and nodded to her aide. "Get it for him." A few minutes later, the aide returned with a bowl of steaming hot water and a single packet of noodles. Jin took them and placed them on the hard table. He tore open the packet, crunched the dry noodles into the bowl and poured in the flavoring powder. Then he poured the hot water over everything. The familiar smell of cheap, spicy noodles began to fill the sterile white room. Soo-min, who had been watching from behind Jin, slowly emerged. Her eyes were fixed on the bowl. The steam rose and her nose twitched. The fear in her eyes began to fade, replaced by recognition and interest. Jin handed her a pair of chopsticks. She didn't hesitate this time. She climbed onto a chair, the oversized coat puffing up around her. She picked up the chopsticks with her delicate fingers and carefully lifted a bundle of noodles. She blew on them and took a bite. The change was instant. Her whole body relaxed. A soft chiming sound of pleasure escaped her lips. It was her laugh. She took another bite, eating happily, the way a child should. The scary white room and the serious adults seemed to vanish for her. There was only the warm, familiar food and the man who had given it to her. When she was finished, she looked at Jin and projected that same warm, grateful feeling he had felt in his apartment. It was a wave of safe home warm Jin. The feeling was so strong and pure that Hyun, standing a few feet away, actually took a step back. She didn't feel the words, but she felt the echo of the emotion, a sudden, unexpected sense of peace and safety that felt completely out of place in the tense room. Hyun stared at the little girl, who was now smiling at Jin. She looked at the empty noodle bowl. She looked at Jin's simple, proud face. The calculations in her mind were changing. She had spent her whole life thinking about weapons, threats, and political maneuvers. She had never considered the power of a bowl of noodles. Her stern expression softened. The plan to hand over a terrified, traumatized child in a formal ceremony now seemed incredibly dangerous. What if the Luminous One felt their child's fear and anger? What if that made things worse? Jin was right. This was a different kind of power. The ceremony, Hyun said slowly, almost to herself. It's the wrong approach. Jin looked at her, waiting. Hyun took a deep breath. Her eyes were clear now. We cannot just give her back as a political object. We need to show them what you showed me. We need to show them she was cared for, that she was happy. She looked at Soo-min. The handover will not be a formal ceremony with diplomats. It will be a meeting. Just you, her, and her parent. No one else. Jin felt a wave of relief. It was a small victory, but it was important. He had made her see. Soo-min, unaware of the big decisions being made, simply reached out and took Jin's hand again. She was warm, she was full, and she was with her friend. In that moment, in the cold, white room, that was all that mattered. The main landing bay of the spaceport was vast and echoing. High above, the ceiling was open to the gray sky. The air was cold and smelled of fuel and ozone. In the center of the huge space sat the Alaris ship. It was not like the blocky, metal human ships. It was beautiful and strange, made of a pearlescent material that seemed to glow with its own soft light. It was silent and still, like a sleeping swan. Jin stood with Soo-min and Hyun. They were alone in the middle of the empty bay. This was not the big ceremony Hyun had first planned. There were no flags, no diplomats, no soldiers. It was just the three of them. Jin's heart was beating hard in his chest. He felt very small. Soo-min held his hand tightly. She was wearing his big coat again. She looked up at the beautiful ship, and her expression was a mix of hope and fear. A ramp extended from the side of the ship, silent and smooth. A figure appeared at the top. It was the Luminous One. They were tall and majestic, just as in the image Soo-min had shared. Their form seemed to be made of shifting light and deep shadow. They wore robes that flowed like liquid starlight. A soft, glowing light circled their head like a crown. Their face was calm and severe, and their eyes, the same amethyst color as Soo-min's, burned with a cold, controlled fury. Their gaze swept over Jin and Hyun with pure disdain before locking onto their child. The air grew heavy. Jin found it hard to breathe. The presence of the Luminous One was like a physical weight. The Luminous One descended the ramp. Their movements were graceful and utterly silent. They stopped a short distance away and spoke. Their voice was not a sound that traveled through the air, but a resonant chime that sounded directly inside Jin's mind. My child. They extended a long, graceful hand, expecting Soo-min to run to them. Soo-min did not run. She looked up at Jin. Her small face was serious. Then she let go of his hand. She carefully unbuttoned the big, bulky coat. She shrugged it off her shoulders and held it out to him. It was a gesture of thanks, a return of what was his. She was saying goodbye. Jin's throat felt tight. He took the coat, its familiar weight feeling heavy in his hands. He had given her warmth, and now she was giving it back. Then Soo-min turned to face her parent. She did not look afraid anymore. She walked forward until she stood before the tall, glowing figure. The Luminous One looked down at her, their expression still cold and angry. Soo-min did something then. She reached up her small silver hand and gently touched the Luminous One's fingers, just like she had done with Jin. A visible shockwave of energy passed through the Alaris ruler. A ripple of light flowed from the point of contact, washing over their form. The Luminous One's body went rigid. Their cold, furious expression shattered. They were being flooded with their daughter's memories. They did not see fear and pain. They saw the dark, rainy alley. They felt the biting cold and the deep terror. And then they saw the large human not as a monster, but as a kind face. They felt the overwhelming warmth of the heavy coat as it was wrapped around their shivering child. They felt the safety of the small, messy apartment. They tasted the strange warm noodles and felt the simple joy it brought her. They felt the gentle touch as the human cleaned the cut on her ear. They felt the deep, trusting sleep on a worn-out couch. They felt the pure, simple kindness. They felt the gratitude their daughter felt for this human. They saw Jin not as a threat, but as a protector. The luminous one's posture changed. The anger melted away, replaced by a look of profound shock. The cold, blue light that surrounded them warmed, shifting to a gentle, golden color. The heavy pressure in the air lifted. They looked from their safe, unharmed daughter to Jin. The disdain in their eyes was gone. In its place was a look of bewildered respect. They saw the coat in Jin's hands and understood its meaning. The luminous one bowed. It was a deep, formal bow, directed not at Hyun, the official, but at Jin, the cargo loader. "You," the resonant voice chimed in their minds. "You sheltered my light in your shadow." The luminous one straightened up, one hand resting on Sumin's head. "We, the Alaris, we have lived for millennia. We have great power. But we have forgotten. We have forgotten the strength of such simple things. We thought your kind knew only chaos. We were wrong." Their glowing eyes held Jin's. "You have shown us a different truth. You have shown us compassion. We will not forget this. We will not forget you." Sumin looked back at Jin one last time. She gave him a small, shy smile. Then she took her parents' hand. Together they turned and walked up the silent ramp into their beautiful ship. Jin stood alone with Hyun, holding his coat. The ramp retracted and the ship began to rise without a sound. It moved up through the open ceiling and disappeared into the gray sky. The threat was over. The war was gone. Hyun let out a long, slow breath. She looked at Jin, a new respect in her eyes. "You were right," she said simply. "The noodles were a better weapon than any threat." Jin didn't answer. He just looked at the empty sky where the ship had been. He thought about the little girl with the amethyst eyes. He thought about the tall, angry parent who had learned about kindness. He pulled on his coat. It was still warm from Sumin wearing it. He was just a man who had helped a lost child. But that simple act had changed everything. It had reminded a powerful ancient race of the strength of a warm coat and a bowl of hot food. And it had saved his world.